The morning of September 15th started like any other peaceful Tuesday in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maple Ridge, Phoenix. 3-year-old Emma Martinez sat cross-legged on her grandmother's freshly watered lawn, her tiny hands carefully patting wet sand into a bright red plastic bucket. Her dark curls bounced as she concentrated intently on creating the perfect sandcastle, her pink tongue poking out slightly in determination. The Arizona sun cast gentle shadows through the oak trees lining the street, creating a picture-perfect scene of childhood innocence. "Myra, abuela," Emma called out in her sweet, high-pitched voice, switching between English and Spanish as she often did. "Look at my castle." Her grandmother, Rosa Martinez, smiled warmly from the porch where she was folding laundry, her weathered hands pausing to wave at her beloved granddaughter. The elderly woman had been watching Emma every Tuesday while her daughter Maria worked her shift at the local hospital. It was their special day together, filled with sandbox adventures, homemade cookies, and countless stories. Across the tree-lined street, the Johnson family's 2-story colonial house sat empty, its owners away on their annual vacation to Colorado. The manicured lawn and decorative flower beds gave no hint of the evil that was about to unfold behind its cheerful yellow shutters. Inside, 34-year-old Marcus Thompson moved with practiced stealth through the master bedroom, stuffing expensive jewelry into a black duffel bag. His bloodshot eyes darted nervously as he grabbed electronics, cash, and anything valuable he could find. This wasn't his first burglary, but desperation had made him sloppy. Thompson had been watching the house for weeks, noting the family's patterns, their vacation schedule, and the quiet nature of the neighborhood. What he hadn't counted on was Mrs. Eleanor Peterson, the 78-year-old retired teacher who lived next door to the Johnsons. Eleanor had always been the unofficial neighborhood watch, spending her mornings tending to her prize-winning rose garden while keeping a protective eye on her community. Her sharp mind, honed by 40 years of teaching elementary school, missed nothing. The sound of breaking glass from the Johnsons' back door had immediately caught Eleanor's attention. She dropped her gardening shears and crept closer to the fence line, her arthritis forgotten in the surge of adrenaline. Through the kitchen window, she could see a figure moving through the house, clearly ransacking the place. Without hesitation, the brave woman pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher asked. This is Eleanor Peterson at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive. There's a burglar in my neighbor's house at 1245. He's inside right now, taking their belongings. The family is on vacation. As Eleanor provided details to the dispatcher, Thompson continued his rampage upstairs, unaware that his time was running out. He had just finished emptying the master bedroom when the distant sound of sirens began echoing through the neighborhood. Panic shot through him like electricity. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to have at least another hour before anyone noticed anything amiss. Thompson raced to the front window and peered through the blinds. His blood turned to ice. 3 police cars were racing down Maple Ridge Drive, their red and blue lights painting the peaceful suburban street in fun, alternating colors of emergency. Neighbors began emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. The net was closing fast. With his heart hammering against his ribs, Thompson grabbed the duffel bag and bolted toward the back door. He had parked his stolen motorcycle 3 blocks away in an alley, but now that seemed like miles. The sirens were getting louder, closer. He burst through the Johnsons' backyard, vaulting over the wooden fence with surprising agility for a man carrying a heavy bag of stolen goods. Emma looked up from her sandcastle as the sirens approached, her innocent brown eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. She had always loved the sound of sirens. They meant heroes were coming to help someone. But this time, the hero's arrival would trigger a nightmare that no child should ever experience. Thompson sprinted through the Petersons' backyard, crashed through their prize-winning rosebush, and found himself in the Martinez family's front yard. That's when he saw her, a tiny little girl in a sunshine yellow dress, sitting peacefully beside her sandcastle, looking up at him with those trusting brown eyes that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Time seemed to slow as desperation consumed Thompson's rational thought. The police cars were turning onto the street now, less than a block away. In his drug-addled panic, he saw only one option: a human shield. Before Emma could even react, before she could call out to her grandmother or run toward the safety of the porch, Thompson dropped his bag and lunged forward. "No, no, please," Rosa Martinez screamed from the porch as she watched the nightmare unfold. The elderly woman dropped her basket of laundry and ran toward her granddaughter, but she was too slow, too far away. Thompson's strong arms wrapped around Emma's tiny body, lifting her from the ground as she began to cry in confusion and terror. The sound that emerged from Emma's throat was unlike anything Rosa had ever heard, a primal scream of pure terror that seemed to pierce the very soul. The 3-year-old had never experienced violence or danger in her short, sheltered life. Her world had been filled with love, laughter, and security. Now, suddenly, she was pressed against a stranger who smelled of sweat and desperation, his grip tight enough to bruise her delicate arms. Thompson pulled a switchblade from his pocket, the metal gleaming in the morning sunlight as he pressed it against Emma's throat. Her screams grew louder, more desperate, as she struggled against his grip. "Stay back," he shouted at the approaching police cars, his voice cracking with panic. "Stay back, or I swear I'll hurt her." The first police car screeched to a halt at the end of the driveway, followed quickly by 2 more. Officers poured out, with their weapons drawn, but they couldn't get a clear shot with Emma in the way. Rosa collapsed on the porch steps, sobbing and praying in Spanish as neighbors gathered behind police barriers, their faces masks of horror and disbelief. The peaceful Tuesday morning in Maple Ridge had become a scene from every parent's worst nightmare. And for little Emma Martinez, clutching her plastic sand bucket even as terror consumed her, life as she knew it was about to change forever. The sand castle she had built with such care lay forgotten, its towers crumbling under the chaos, much like the innocence that was being shattered in that terrible moment. The screech of tires against asphalt pierced the air as Officer Sarah Chun's patrol car rounded the corner onto Maple Ridge Drive at breakneck speed. Her radio crackled with urgent updates from dispatch. Armed suspect with hostage, approximately 3 years old. Proceed with extreme caution. Sarah's knuckles whitened as she gripped the steering wheel, her 5 years of police experience having prepared her for many situations, but never one involving a child so young. In the back seat behind the protective barrier, Rex shifted restlessly in his specially designed harness. The 4-year-old German Shepherd had been Sarah's partner for 2 years, and their bond went far beyond the typical officer-canine relationship. Rex wasn't just a police dog. He was Sarah's trusted companion, her backup, and in many ways, her closest friend. His dark brown eyes reflected an intelligence that had been honed through months of intensive training at the Phoenix Police Department's K-9 Academy. Rex's ears perked up as he sensed the tension radiating from Sarah. His powerful nose detected the familiar sense of adrenaline and fear that always accompanied high-stakes situations. But there was something else, that made his protective instinct surge. The scent of a child in distress carried on the wind, and Rex's entire body went on high alert. His training had included scenarios with civilians, but his natural protective instinct toward children was something deeper, more primal. As their patrol car approached the scene, Sarah's heart sank. The street looked like a war zone. Police. Barriers had been hastily erected, creating a perimeter around the Martinez property. Neighbors clustered behind yellow tape, some crying, others holding each other for support. News vans were already arriving, their satellite dishes extending toward the sky like mechanical vultures seeking to feast on tragedy. But it was the scene in the front yard that made Sarah's blood run cold. A man in his 30s, unshaven and wild-eyed, held a tiny girl against his chest. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the terror in the child's face. Her dark curls matted with tears, her small body trembling like a leaf in a storm. The knife at her throat caught the sunlight, creating a deadly glimmer that seemed to mock the peaceful suburban setting. Unit 47 on scene, Sarah radioed, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Suspect is male, approximately 30 to 35 years old, armed with a blade. Hostage appears to be a Hispanic female child, approximately 3 years old. Requesting SWAT. Backup and negotiator. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, the incident commander, approached Sarah's vehicle with grim determination. His weathered face bore the lines of someone who had seen too much violence in his 23 years on the force, but even he looked shaken by the sight of the terrified child. Chun, we need to establish a perimeter and try to de-escalate. The suspect is Marcus Thompson. We've got a warrant out on him for 3 previous burglaries. He's desperate and unpredictable. Sarah nodded, but as she prepared to exit her vehicle, Rex began displaying behavior she had never seen before. The normally disciplined dog was whining softly, his eyes fixed intently on the little girl across the yard. His tail, usually still, during operations, was moving in what Sarah recognized as a protective gesture, not the excited wagging of play, but the measured movement of a guardian assessing a threat to someone under his protection. Easy, boy, Sarah whispered, reaching back to touch Rex's muzzle through the barrier. I know you want to help. We'll figure this out. As Sarah stepped out of her patrol car, Thompson's frantic voice cut through the air like a knife. Stay back. All of you stay back. I've got nothing to lose here. His grip on Emma tightened, causing the child to cry out in pain and fear. Rosa. Martinez, still collapsed on the porch steps, let out a wail that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. The standoff began in earnest. Sarah positioned herself behind her open car door, her service weapon drawn but lowered. There was no clear shot with Emma in the way, and the risk was too great. Other officers took similar positions, creating a semicircle around Thompson, but maintaining enough distance to avoid triggering his desperation into violence. My name is Officer Chun, Sarah called out, her voice calm and authoritative. Let's talk about this, Marcus. What do you need? What can we do to resolve this peacefully? Thompson's eyes darted frantically between the officers, the gathering crowd, and the news cameras that were now rolling. Sweat poured down his face despite the morning coolness, and his hands shook as the reality of his situation became clear. He was trapped, and everyone knew it. I need you all to back off. Give me a car and safe passage out of here, or this little girl pays the price. Behind him, Rex continued his unusual behavior. The German shepherd had positioned himself at the front of his compartment, his intelligent eyes never leaving Emma. Something extraordinary was happening, a connection that transcended the chaos and fear surrounding them. Rex's training included reading human emotions and responding appropriately, but this was different. This was personal. Emma, despite her terror, began to notice the beautiful dog watching her from the police car. Through her tears, she saw his kind eyes and the gentle way he held his head. For just a moment, the knife at her throat and the stranger's grip seemed less terrifying. She had always loved dogs her family couldn't afford a pet, but she would light up whenever she saw the neighbor's golden retriever playing in their yard. Sarah noticed Emma's gaze shifting toward Rex and had a sudden inspiration. "Marcus," she called out, "I can see you're scared and feeling trapped. But that little girl, she's somebody's whole world. She's probably got parents who love her more than life itself. You don't want to hurt an innocent child, do you?" As Sarah spoke, she caught Rex's eye and gave him a subtle hand signal, one they had practiced countless times in training. It meant gentle approach, a command used when dealing with frightened civilians who needed comfort rather than force. Rex understood immediately and shifted his posture, making himself appear less intimidating while maintaining his alert readiness. The psychological dynamics of the situation were shifting. Thompson was beginning to realize that his plan had no real exit strategy. The police weren't going to simply let him drive away with a hostage, and every passing minute brought more officers, more complications, more chances for everything to go horribly wrong. But it was Rex who was becoming the unexpected variable in this deadly equation. Mrs. Peterson, watching from behind the police barriers, whispered to her neighbor, "Look at that police dog. He's watching that baby like he's her guardian angel." Other neighbors began to notice too the way Rex's attention never wavered from Emma. The protective stance he maintained, the almost supernatural calm he projected even in the middle of chaos. Time seemed suspended in those crucial moments. The suburban street had become a stage where a child's life hung in the balance, where a desperate criminal's choices would determine multiple futures, and where a specially trained police dog was about to prove that sometimes heroes come with 4 legs and hearts bigger than anyone could imagine. The morning sun continued to shine down on Maple Ridge Drive, but everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would change them all forever. In just a few more moments, Rex would demonstrate that the bond between humans and animals can transcend even the most terrifying circumstances, and that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources. The standoff had lasted exactly 57 minutes. It felt like an eternity to everyone involved. When backup units finally surrounded Marcus Thompson from all angles, cutting off every possible escape route, he had no choice but to release Emma and surrender. The moment his arms loosened around her tiny body, Officer Chun rushed forward and scooped the traumatized child into her arms, carrying her to safety while Rex maintained a protective watch nearby. But as the handcuffs clicked around Thompson's wrists and the immediate danger passed, a different kind of crisis was just beginning. Emma Martinez, the vibrant 3-year-old who had chattered constantly in both English and Spanish, who had filled her grandmother's house with laughter and endless questions, had fallen completely silent. The light that had always danced in her dark brown eyes seemed dimmed, replaced by a haunting emptiness that broke everyone's heart. Dr. Lisa Park, a renowned child psychologist specializing in trauma cases, received the emergency call at her Phoenix clinic that same afternoon. With 20 years of experience treating children who had survived unthinkable horrors, she had seen the devastating effects of violent crime on young minds. But when she first met Emma 3 days after the incident, even her professional composure was shaken by the profound silence emanating from such a small person. "She hasn't spoken a single word since it happened," Maria Martinez whispered to Dr. Park during their initial consultation. Emma's mother, a petite woman with worry lines now etched permanently around her eyes, sat in the clinic's waiting room, holding her daughter's limp hand. "She won't eat properly. She won't play. She just sits and stares. It's like our little girl disappeared that day." Carlos Martinez, Emma's father, paced the small room like a caged animal. The usually jovial construction worker had taken indefinite leave from his job to be with his family during this crisis. "She used to sing all the time," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Every morning, she would wake up singing these little songs she made up. Now, nothing. Just silence." Dr. Park knelt down to Emma's eye level, her movements slow and deliberate. The child sat motionless in the miniature chair, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched tightly against her chest, a rabbit she had refused to put down since the incident. "Hello, Emma," Dr. Park said softly in both English and Spanish. "My name is Dr. Lisa. I'm here to help you feel better." Emma's response was barely perceptible, a slight tightening of her grip on the stuffed rabbit and a barely noticeable recoil backward in her chair. But her eyes, those expressive brown eyes that had once sparkled with curiosity and mischief, remained fixed on some invisible point beyond Dr. Park's shoulder, as if she was seeing something no one else could see. The trauma sessions began immediately. Dr. Park's office had been specifically designed for young patients, with soft pastel colors, child-sized furniture, and shelves lined with toys and art supplies. She employed a technique called play therapy, allowing children to express their feelings through toys and creative activities when words failed them. But Emma remained unresponsive to every gentle attempt at engagement. "Let's draw a picture together," Dr. Park suggested during their fourth session, placing crayons and paper on the small table between them. For the first time since the sessions began, Emma showed a flicker of interest. Her small hand reached hesitantly toward a brown crayon, then stopped as if paralyzed by some invisible force. Days turned into weeks, and the silence continued. Emma's parents watched helplessly as their daughter retreated further into herself. She would sit for hours in her room, surrounded by toys that had once brought her joy, but now remained untouched. Meal times became battles of wills, with Maria coaxing her daughter to eat just a few bites, while Emma stared blankly at her plate. The most heartbreaking moments came at night. Emma, who had previously slept peacefully through the night in her own bed, now suffered from violent nightmares. She would wake up screaming, her small body drenched in sweat, calling out in terror before falling back into that awful silence. The only way she could sleep was wedged between her parents and their bed. But even then, she would jolt awake at the slightest sound. During the 6th week of therapy, something unexpected began to happen. Dr. Park had filled a sandbox in the corner of her office with various toys cars, action figures, dolls, and animals. Most children gravitated toward different toys depending on their interests and emotional needs. But Emma consistently chose only one type of toy: small plastic police dogs. She would arrange the police dogs in careful formations around other toys, creating elaborate scenes that Dr. Park began to document meticulously. In every arrangement, the dogs were positioned protectively around smaller figures, usually a little girl figure that Emma would handle with extraordinary gentleness. "Tell me about your dogs, Emma," Dr. Park would say softly during each session. Emma's only response was to move the police dogs closer to the little girl figure, sometimes making tiny whimpering sounds that seemed to come from deep within her chest. The breakthrough, though small, came during the 8th week. Emma had been arranging her usual scene with the police dogs when she suddenly looked up at Dr. Park with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Safe, doggy," she whispered the first words. She had spoken since the incident. The words were barely audible, but they hit Dr. Park like a thunderclap. "Yes, safe, doggy," Dr. Park repeated gently, fighting to keep the excitement out of her voice. "The doggy keeps you safe." Emma nodded almost imperceptibly and returned to her silent play. But something had shifted. In her notes that day, Dr. Park wrote, "Patient has made first verbal contact. Significant attachment to police dog imagery suggests positive association formed during traumatic incident. This connection may be key to her recovery process." At home, Emma's behavior began to show subtle changes. She started sleeping with a stuffed German Shepherd that her grandmother Rosa had brought her, the first toy she had shown any interest in since the incident. She would whisper to it during the night, conversations too quiet for her parents to hear, but it was communication nonetheless. Maria and Carlos began to notice that Emma would stop and stare whenever they passed police cars during their drives around town. Her reaction wasn't fear. It was something else, something that looked almost like longing. She would press her face to the car window and search the police vehicles, as if looking for something specific. "She's looking for the police dog," Maria realized one afternoon after watching Emma's behavior at a grocery store parking lot where a police car was parked. "She's looking for the dog that was there that day." Dr. Park's professional assessment was becoming clearer with each session. Emma had formed what psychologists call a protective association with Officer Chun's canine partner during the most terrifying moment of her young life. In her mind, the police dog represented safety, protection, and the end of her nightmare. This connection had become her psychological anchor, the one positive element she could focus on amid the trauma. But Dr. Park also knew that this attachment, while potentially therapeutic, could become problematic if not properly addressed. Emma needed to process the entire experience, not just cling to one element of it. The challenge would be using her connection to the police dog as a bridge to healing, rather than allowing it to become another form of retreat from reality. As autumn approached Phoenix, 3 months after that terrible morning on Maple Ridge Drive, Emma Martinez remained locked in her world of selective silence. She had spoken only those 2 precious words, "safe doggy," but they had given her family and Dr. Park hope that somewhere inside the traumatized child, there Emma was. Still there, waiting for the right key to unlock her voice and her healing. District Attorney Rachel Foster stared at the case file spread across her mahogany desk, the weight of justice bearing down on her shoulders like a physical force. The fluorescent lights in her downtown Phoenix office cast harsh shadows across crime scene photos, witness statements, and psychological evaluations. It painted a disturbing picture of Marcus Thompson's crimes. At 38, Foster had prosecuted hundreds of cases during her 12-year career, but none had kept her awake at night quite like this one. The evidence against Thompson was overwhelming. Security cameras from neighboring houses had captured portions of the burglary. Mrs. Peterson's testimony was rock solid. Physical evidence linked Thompson to 3 other break-ins in the area. But the kidnapping and child endangerment charges, the ones that would put Thompson away for decades instead of just a few years, hinged entirely on the testimony of a 3-year-old girl who hadn't spoken more than 2 words in 3 months. "It's a prosecutor's nightmare," Foster confided to her assistant district attorney, Michael Chun, as they reviewed the case files together. "We have a victim who can't speak, a defense attorney who's already filing motions to exclude her testimony based on competency issues, and a media circus that's turning this into a 3-ring show." James Morrison, Thompson's defense attorney, was exactly the kind of lawyer Foster dreaded facing in high-profile cases. At 55, he had built his reputation on finding technicalities and exploiting weaknesses in the prosecution's cases. His silver hair and expensive suits gave him an air of respectability that juries found trustworthy, and his closing arguments had saved dozens of guilty clients from the full consequences of their actions. Morrison had already filed 17 different motions with the court, each one designed to chip away at the prosecution's case. The most damaging was his motion to exclude Emma's testimony entirely, arguing that a traumatized 3-year-old who had barely spoken since the incident could not be considered a competent witness under Arizona state law. "Your Honor," Morrison had argued during the pre-trial hearing, his voice dripping with false concern, "this child has been so severely traumatized that she's essentially nonverbal. Any attempt to put her on the witness stand would be nothing more than prosecutorial theater designed to manipulate the jury's emotions rather than establish facts. My client deserves a fair trial based on evidence, not sympathy." Judge Patricia Williams, a stern woman in her early 60s with a reputation for fairness and no-nonsense courtroom management, found herself in an unprecedented situation. In her 22 years on the bench, she had never dealt with a witness quite so young, or so traumatized. The legal precedents were murky at best, and the stakes couldn't be higher. "I need to see comprehensive psychological evaluations," Judge Williams had ruled. "Dr. Park's assessment will be crucial in determining this child's competency to testify. I will not allow this courtroom to become a source of further trauma for the victim, but I also cannot ignore the possibility that she may be our only eyewitness to crucial elements of these crimes." Dr. Park found herself thrust into a role she had never wanted, not just Emma's therapist, but a key player in a legal battle that would determine her patient's future and her attacker's fate. The pressure was immense. If Emma couldn't testify, Thompson might receive a much lighter sentence for the burglary charges alone. But if pushing Emma to testify caused further psychological damage, Dr. Park would never forgive herself. "The child has made minimal progress," Dr. Park reported during her deposition, with both legal teams present. "She's spoken perhaps a dozen words total since the incident, mostly related to the police dog she associates with her rescue. Her ability to provide coherent, sequential testimony about the traumatic events is highly questionable at this time." Morrison leaned back in his chair with barely concealed satisfaction. If the prosecution's own expert witness was expressing doubts about Emma's ability to testify, his job was already half done. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, would compelling this child to relive her trauma in a courtroom setting be detrimental to her psychological recovery?" Dr. Park felt the trap closing around her. Any re-traumatization could indeed be harmful to her healing process, she admitted reluctantly, watching Foster's face fall across the conference table. But Foster wasn't ready to give up. That evening, she drove to the Martinez family home. In their modest neighborhood, where chain-link fences surrounded small but well-maintained yards and children's bicycles lined the driveways. She needed to see Emma for herself, to understand what they were truly dealing with. Maria Martinez answered the door with tired eyes and a worn smile. "Miss Foster, please come in." Emma's in the living room with her father. The house smelled of fresh tortillas and coffee, normal family scents that seemed at odds with the legal drama surrounding them. Emma sat on the carpet beside her father, surrounded by an elaborate arrangement of toy police dogs. She had positioned them in a protective circle around a small doll, recreating the scene that had apparently become her primary form of communication. When Foster entered the room, Emma looked up briefly before returning her attention to the toys. "Mia," Carlos said gently, "this is the lady who's trying to help make sure the bad man can't hurt anyone else." Emma's only response was to move one of the police dogs closer to the doll figure. Foster knelt down beside Emma, careful not to disturb the toy arrangement. "Those are beautiful dogs, Emma. They look very brave and strong." For a moment, Emma's fingers paused in their careful positioning of the toys. She looked at Foster with those large, expressive eyes that still held too much knowledge for such a young face. "Safe doggies," Emma whispered, so softly that Foster almost missed it. "Keep the little girl safe?" The simple words hit Foster like a revelation. Emma wasn't just playing with toys. She was telling her story, over and over, in the only way she could manage. The police dogs weren't just objects to her. They were symbols of protection, safety, and survival. Over the next 2 weeks, Foster worked closely with Dr. Park to develop an unprecedented approach to Emma's testimony. Traditional courtroom procedures would have to be modified extensively. They requested permission to have Emma testify via closed-circuit television from a child-friendly room adjacent to the courtroom. Dr. Park would be present throughout the testimony to provide support and intervene if Emma became too distressed. Judge Williams approved most of their requests, but Morrison fought them every step of the way. These accommodations are so extensive that they fundamentally change the nature of legal testimony. he argued. My client has the right to face his accuser. These modifications create an atmosphere of prejudice that assumes guilt before the trial even begins. The legal maneuvering continued for weeks. Expert witnesses were called to testify about child psychology, traumatic memory, and the reliability of testimony from very young witnesses. Morrison brought in his own child psychologist, who argued that Emma's selective mutism made her an unreliable witness whose testimony would be more prejudicial than probative. Meanwhile, Emma continued her therapy sessions with Dr. Park, slowly, building trust and communication skills. The breakthrough they all hoped for remained elusive, but small signs of progress appeared. Emma began incorporating more figures into her toy arrangements: police officers, paramedics, and family members. Her whispered commentary grew slightly more detailed, though still centered around the safe doggies who had protected her. She's processing the trauma through play, Dr. Park explained to Foster during one of their weekly consultations. It's a healthy response, actually. But whether she can translate that processing into coherent verbal testimony in a legal setting is still very much in question. The trial date loomed closer, and Foster felt the weight of an entire case resting on the fragile shoulders of a traumatized 3-year-old. If Emma couldn't testify effectively, Marcus Thompson would likely serve only a few years for burglary. The kidnapping and child endangerment charges, the ones that would ensure he couldn't hurt another child, would disappear along with Emma's voice. As Foster reviewed her notes late one evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial, some key that would unlock Emma's ability to communicate her experience. The answer was there, somewhere in the careful arrangements of toy police dogs and whispered words about safety, but time was running out to find it. The morning of November 18th arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to mirror the anxiety hanging over the Maricopa County Superior Court building. Judge Patricia Williams had spent the weekend reviewing every precedent, every child witness case in Arizona legal history, preparing for what promised to be one of the most challenging trials of her career. At 6:30 a.m., she stood in her chambers, adjusting her black robes while studying the transformed courtroom through her window. The courtroom had been completely reimagined for Emma Martinez. Gone were the intimidating wooden benches and formal atmosphere that could terrify even adult witnesses. In their place, court staff had arranged child-sized furniture with bright, cheerful colors. Soft lighting replaced the harsh fluorescence. A small play area with carefully selected toys sat in one corner, while child-friendly artwork adorned the walls. Even the witness stand had been replaced with a comfortable chair at a low table, making it feel more like a living room conversation than formal legal testimony. Dr. Lisa Park arrived at the courthouse at 7 a.m., carrying a bag filled with Emma's favorite therapeutic toys and comfort items. Her usually steady hands trembled slightly as she reviewed her notes one final time. In 20 years of practice, she had testified in numerous court cases, but never with stakes this high or with a patient this vulnerable. The child psychologist had spent the previous evening on a conference call with Foster and Judge Williams, fine-tuning every detail of Emma's testimony process. Remember, Dr. Park had emphasized during the call, Emma's ability to communicate fluctuates dramatically based on her comfort level and sense of safety. The slightest disruption to our carefully planned environment could cause her to withdraw completely. We may only get one chance at this. By 8 a.m., the Martinez family arrived at the courthouse through a private entrance, shielding Emma from the growing crowd of reporters and curious onlookers gathering on the courthouse steps. Maria Martinez had barely slept in 3 days, her mind racing through every possible scenario. She carried Emma, who was dressed in her favorite yellow dress, the same color she'd worn on that terrible day 4 months ago, a detail that hadn't escaped Dr. Park's notice. Carlos Martinez walked beside them, His construction worker's hands clenched into fists as news cameras flashed in their direction. "Mia," he whispered to Emma, "remember what Dr. Lisa told you? You just have to tell them about the safe doggies, okay? About how the nice police doggie helped you." Emma's only response was to bury her face deeper into her mother's shoulder, her small arms wrapped tightly around her stuffed German shepherd, the toy that had become her constant companion since the incident. The stress of the morning was already taking its toll on the fragile progress she had made in therapy. In the prosecution's conference room, Rachel Foster paced nervously while reviewing her carefully prepared questions one final time. Each query had been crafted in consultation with Dr. Park, using language and concepts that Emma had responded to during therapy sessions. Foster had even practiced her tone and body language to appear as non-threatening as possible, understanding that Emma's perception of her as safe or dangerous could make or break the entire case. "She's our only witness to the kidnapping," Foster reminded her assistant, Michael Chun, who was organizing exhibits and evidence. Without her testimony, Thompson walks away with a light sentence for burglary. "We need Emma to tell the jury that Thompson grabbed her, threatened her with the knife, and used her as a human shield. But if we push too hard, traumatize her further. The unspoken consequence hung in the air between them. Foster had built her career on seeking justice for victims, but never before had she faced a situation where pursuing justice might cause more harm to the very person she was trying to protect. Meanwhile, in the defense conference room, James Morrison was implementing a strategy that was both legally sound and morally questionable. He had no intention of cross-examining Emma harshly. That would only generate sympathy for the prosecution. Instead, his plan was subtler and potentially more devastating. He would simply allow Emma's own limitations to speak for themselves. The prosecution is about to demonstrate exactly why 3-year-olds shouldn't testify in criminal cases, Morrison explained to his client, Marcus Thompson, who sat slouched in his orange jumpsuit, looking remarkably different from the desperate man who had terrorized a child 4 months earlier. When that little girl can't answer basic questions or breaks down crying, the jury will see that this entire proceeding is unfair to everyone involved. Thompson nodded, though something in his eyes suggested discomfort with using a child's trauma as a defense strategy. Prison had given him time to think about what he had done, and the memory of Emma's terrified screams haunted his nights as much as they did hers. At 9:30 a.m., the moment everyone had been preparing for arrived, Dr. Park led Emma through the courthouse's child-friendly entrance into the modified courtroom. The little girl's dark eyes widened as she took in the transformed space, so different from the stark, intimidating courtroom she had expected based on television shows her parents watched. "Look, Emma," Dr. Park said softly, kneeling down to the child's eye level. "They made this room special just for you. See the pretty colors and the toys? And there's the comfortable chair where you'll sit to talk with the nice lady." Emma nodded slightly, though her grip on her stuffed German shepherd tightened. She allowed Dr. Park to lead her to the witness area, where Foster waited with what she hoped was a warm, encouraging smile. Judge Williams watched from the bench, having already dismissed the jury so Emma could acclimate to the environment without the pressure of additional observers. "Hi, Emma," Foster said gently, using the same tone Dr. Park had coached her to employ. "I'm Rachel, and I just want to ask you a few questions about the day you met the police doggie. Is that okay?" For a moment, it seemed like everything might work according to plan. Emma looked at Foster with curiosity rather than fear, and even managed a tiny nod. Dr. Park settled into a chair nearby, close enough to provide support, but far enough away not to interfere with the legal process. But then disaster struck in the most unexpected way. As Foster began her first gentle question about Emma's memories of that September morning, the courtroom's main doors opened with a loud creak. Court security, following standard protocol for high-profile cases had allowed additional officers into the room for extra security. Their heavy footsteps echoed across the modified courtroom as they took their positions. The sound triggered something primal and terrifying in Emma's traumatized psyche. The footsteps, the uniforms, the sudden presence of multiple authority figures, it all crashed together in her mind, transporting her instantly back to that terrible morning when armed officers had surrounded her and her captor. Her small body began to shake uncontrollably. "No, no, no." Emma suddenly screamed, the first loud words she had spoken since the incident. She dropped her stuffed German shepherd and curled into a tight ball in the witness chair, her hands covering her eyes, as if trying to block out the world. Too many, too scary, want to go home. Dr. Park immediately moved to Emma's side, her professional training kicking in as she recognized the signs of a full panic attack. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. These are good police officers. They're here to protect you." But Emma was beyond hearing rational explanations. 4 months of carefully managed therapy progress seemed to evaporate in an instant as she retreated into herself, sobbing uncontrollably and calling out for her mother in Spanish. "Mommy! Mommy! Tengo miedo." Judge Williams immediately called for a recess, and Maria Martinez rushed into the courtroom to comfort her daughter. Foster watched in horror as her carefully constructed case began crumbling before her eyes. Morrison, despite his satisfaction at seeing his strategy succeed, found himself genuinely disturbed by the sight of a child in such obvious distress. In the hallway outside the courtroom, as Emma clung to her parents and slowly calmed down with Dr. Park's help, the reality of the situation became clear to everyone involved. The traditional legal system, despite all their modifications and accommodations, was simply too overwhelming for a 3-year-old trauma victim. "She keeps asking for the doggy," Maria whispered to Dr. Park, as Emma finally stopped crying but remained curled in her arms. "She keeps saying, 'Where is the doggy? I want the doggy.'" Dr. Park suddenly realized what they had been missing all along. In all their careful preparations, they had focused on making the courtroom child-friendly, but they had overlooked the one element that had given Emma strength and comfort from the very beginning: her connection to Rex, the police dog, who had been present during her rescue. But Rex was just a police dog doing his job. How could they possibly explain to a judge and jury that a 3-year-old's ability to testify might depend on the presence of a German shepherd who had no official role in the legal proceedings? Foster's heart sank as she realized that they might have finally reached an insurmountable obstacle in their pursuit of justice for Emma Martinez. The courthouse hallway buzzed with hushed conversations and barely contained panic, as Emma's sobs finally quieted to exhausted whimpers in her mother's arms. Judge Patricia Williams had called an emergency recess, and the weight of potential failure hung over everyone like a suffocating blanket. Rachel Foster stood against the marble wall, her carefully prepared case notes scattered on the floor, where she had dropped them when rushing to help during Emma's breakdown. "This is over," Foster whispered to Dr. Park, her voice hollow with defeat. "I can't put her through this again. Look at her, she's traumatized all over again, and we haven't even gotten to the actual testimony yet." The district attorney's usual confidence had crumbled as completely as Emma's composure, replaced by a crushing sense of responsibility for the child's suffering. Dr. Park knelt beside the Martinez family, her professional instincts warring with her growing sense of helplessness. Emma had retreated so far into herself that she seemed unreachable, her small body trembling against her mother's chest. The careful progress they had made over 4 months of therapy appeared to have evaporated in a single traumatic moment. "Mia, please talk to Dr. Lisa," Maria pleaded softly in Spanish, stroking her daughter's dark curls. "Tell her what you need. What would make you feel better?" Emma's response was barely audible, muffled against her mother's shoulder. Quiero. El Perrito. I want the doggy. Where's the safe doggy? The words hit Dr. Park like a thunderbolt of realization. In all their meticulous planning, the modified courtroom, the child-friendly environment, the careful psychological preparation, they had overlooked the most crucial element of Emma's healing process. The police dog wasn't just a memory from that terrible day. He had become Emma's symbol of safety, her psychological anchor in a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly unpredictable. Carlos Martinez, who had been pacing the hallway in frustrated silence, suddenly stopped and turned to face the group. She's been asking about that police dog every single day since it happened, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Every time we drive past a police car, she looks for him. Every night when she plays with her toys, it's always about the police dogs protecting the little girl. How did we not see this? Foster looked up from her scattered notes, a spark of desperate hope flickering in her eyes. The police dog from the scene, do you remember which officer handled him? We need to find that dog, and we need to find him. Now. While Foster frantically made phone calls to the Phoenix Police Department, trying to track down Officer Sarah Chun and Rex, James Morrison emerged from the courtroom with an expression that was equal parts satisfaction and discomfort. His legal strategy had worked exactly as planned. The prosecution's key witness had proven incapable of providing coherent testimony. But watching a 3-year-old child suffer a panic attack had left him feeling hollow rather than victorious. Mrs. Foster, Morrison approached with uncharacteristic gentleness. Perhaps it's time to discuss a plea arrangement. This child has clearly been through enough, and putting her through more questioning would be cruel to everyone involved. Foster barely looked up from her phone. Not now, Morrison. Give me 20 minutes. She was already dialing the police dispatcher. Voice urgent as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. I need to reach Officer Sarah Chun immediately. It's about the Marcus Thompson case. The child witness needs her canine partner present. The dispatcher, initially confused by the unusual request, quickly grasped the urgency when Foster explained that Emma's testimony and Thompson's conviction might depend on the presence of the police dog who had been at the scene during the kidnapping. Meanwhile, across town at the Phoenix Police Department's K-9 training facility, Officer Sarah Chun was conducting routine patrol exercises with Rex when her radio crackled to life. Unit 47, please respond to emergency call from District Attorney's Office. Code 2, regarding the Martinez case. Sarah's heart rate immediately spiked. She had been dreading this day for months, knowing that eventually she and Rex might be called to testify about their role in Emma's rescue. But she had never imagined that their presence might be needed for the victim's testimony rather than their own. Control, this is Unit 47. What's the nature of the emergency? Sarah responded, already heading toward her patrol car with Rex trotting beside her. The dispatcher's voice carried an urgency that made Sarah break into a run. District Attorney Foster needs you and your canine partner at the courthouse immediately. The child witness is unable to proceed with testimony without the presence of your dog. Rex seemed to sense the importance of the moment as they raced through Phoenix traffic toward downtown. The German shepherd sat alert in his compartment, his intelligent brown eyes watching the familiar city streets blur past. Something in Sarah's tension, her rapid breathing and white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, told him that this wasn't a routine call. Back at the courthouse, Dr. Park had managed to coax Emma into a small conference room where the child sat curled up with her. Stuffed German shepherd, occasionally whispering to the toy in a mixture of English and Spanish. Perrito Valenti, she murmured. Brave doggy, where are you? Foster paced outside the conference room, checking her phone every 30 seconds for updates from the police department. Judge Williams emerged from her chambers, her usually stern expression softened by genuine concern for the traumatized child. "Miss Foster, I've been researching precedents for therapy animals in courtroom proceedings," the judge said quietly. "There are a few cases in California and New York where dogs have been present during child victim testimony. It's highly unusual, but not without legal foundation if the animal serves a legitimate therapeutic purpose." Hope surged through Foster's chest. "Your Honor, if we can demonstrate that the police dog's presence is essential for Emma's ability to testify, would you consider allowing it?" Judge Williams nodded slowly. "I'd need clear expert testimony from Dr. Park about the therapeutic necessity, and I'd want assurance that the dog won't disrupt proceedings. But if it means this child can tell her story and help us achieve justice, I'm willing to consider unprecedented measures." At that moment, Foster's phone rang. The caller ID showed the Phoenix Police Department, and she answered on the first ring. "Officer Chun? Thank God you got the message. Where are you?" Sarah's voice came through clearly, despite the sound of traffic in the background. "About 5 minutes from the courthouse." "I have to ask, is this really necessary?" "Rex is a working police dog, not a therapy animal. I'm not sure how he'll react in a courtroom setting." "Officer Chun," Foster said, her voice thick with emotion, "that little girl hasn't been able to function normally since the day you and Rex saved her life. She's been asking for your dog every single day for 4 months. Without him, she can't testify. Without her testimony, the man who terrorized her goes free. Please, we're desperate." There was a long pause before Sarah responded. "We'll be there in 3 minutes. I just hope Rex remembers her as clearly as she apparently remembers him." Dr. Park emerged from the conference room with tears in her eyes. "She's been showing me drawings she made during our last therapy session," she told Foster quietly. "They're all pictures of herself standing next to a police dog, and in every single drawing, they're both smiling. That dog isn't just a memory for her. He's become her symbol of survival, her proof that she can be safe in a dangerous world." As the sound of approaching sirens reached the courthouse, Emma suddenly lifted her head from her stuffed animal. Her dark eyes, which had been dull with exhaustion and fear, suddenly sparked with something that looked remarkably like hope. "El Perito Vine," she whispered, the first coherent words she had spoken since her breakdown. "The doggy is coming." Foster felt her heart racing as she realized that somehow, impossibly, Emma had recognized the specific sound of Rex's unit approaching. After 4 months of silence and withdrawal, the traumatized child had just demonstrated an awareness that defied explanation, unless her bond with that police dog ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Outside the courthouse, Officer Sarah Chun was about to discover that sometimes the most important police work happens not on the streets, but in the quiet moments when a hero with 4 legs and a gentle heart proves that healing can come from the most unexpected places. The sound of Officer Sarah Chun's patrol car pulling up to the courthouse sent ripples of anticipation through the marble hallways where Emma's fate hung in the balance. Through the tall courthouse windows, Foster watched as Sarah emerged from the driver's seat, her uniform crisp despite the emergency call that had brought her racing across Phoenix. But it was what happened next that would be talked about in legal circles for years to come. Rex bounded out of the K9 compartment with an energy that seemed unusual for the normally disciplined police dog. His dark ears perked forward, his powerful nose lifted kicked scents carried on the desert breeze, and something in his demeanor suggested he knew exactly why he was there. Sarah had seen her partner react to many different situations during their 2 years together, but she had never seen him display this particular combination of alertness and what could only be described as eager anticipation. "Easy, boy," Sarah murmured, clipping Rex's lead to his collar as they approached the courthouse steps. "I'm not sure what we're walking into, but apparently little girl needs us." Rex's tail wagged in response, not the excited wagging of play, but the steady, confident movement of a dog who understood his mission. Inside the courthouse, Emma had been sitting in the small conference room with her parents and Dr. Park when something extraordinary happened. Despite being 3 floors up and behind thick walls, the moment Rex's paws touched the courthouse pavement, Emma's entire body language changed. She sat up straighter, her tear-stained face turning toward the window as if drawn by an invisible force. "He's here," Emma whispered, the clearest words she had spoken all morning. "Mi perito Valenti is here." Dr. Park felt goosebumps rise on her arms as she witnessed the transformation. Emma's breathing, which had been shallow and rapid since her panic attack, began to slow and deepen. The tight lines of fear around her eyes started to soften, and for the first time in hours, she released her death grip on her stuffed German Shepherd. Foster's phone buzzed with a text from courthouse security. "Officer Chun and K9 Rex entering building now." She looked at Dr. Park with a mixture of hope and disbelief. How is this possible? How does she know he's here? Trauma bonds can create connections that we don't fully understand, Dr. Park replied quietly, never taking her eyes off Emma. In her mind, that dog represents the moment her nightmare ended. Her psychological attachment to him may be deeper than any of us realized. Maria Martinez watched her daughter with wonder and growing hope. For 4 months, she had seen Emma retreat further and further into herself, becoming a shadow of the vibrant child she had been. But now, as footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, Emma was sitting up, alert and present in a way she hadn't been since that terrible September morning. The conference room door opened, and Sarah Chun stepped inside. Still uncertain about the role she and Rex were supposed to play in these legal proceedings. She had been briefed quickly by courthouse security, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw. A tiny girl in a yellow dress, whose face lit up with pure joy the moment she spotted the German Shepherd beside Sarah. "Rex!" Emma cried out, using the dog's name for the first time since the incident. She had heard it mentioned during that chaotic day, but had never spoken it aloud until this moment. "Me hero." Rex's reaction was immediate and remarkable. The professionally trained police dog, who had been taught to maintain discipline and focus in all situations, seemed to recognize Emma with an intensity that surprised even Sarah. His tail began wagging with genuine enthusiasm, and he pulled gently against his lead, clearly wanting to approach the child. "Is it okay if he comes closer?" Sarah asked Dr. Park, who nodded with tears in her eyes at witnessing this reunion. Sarah unclipped Rex's lead, and the magnificent German Shepherd moved with careful, deliberate steps toward Emma. His approach was gentle but confident, as if he remembered exactly who this little girl was and understood the importance of this moment. When he reached Emma's chair, he sat down beside her and placed his large head on her lap, looking up at her with those intelligent brown eyes that had somehow never left her memory. Emma's small hands found Rex's soft ears, and she began to stroke them gently while whispering to him in Spanish. "Ti me salvaste," she said softly. "You saved me. I knew you would come back." The adults in the room watched in amazement as Emma began to relax completely for the first time since entering the courthouse. Her breathing returned to normal, her shoulders dropped from their tense position, and the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes began to fade. Rex seemed to understand his role perfectly, remaining calm and steady as Emma leaned against his warm fur. Foster felt a surge of hope unlike anything she had experienced in her legal career. "Emma," she said gently, kneeling down beside the child and her 4-legged guardian, "how would you feel about telling Judge Williams and some other people about what happened that scary day, with Rex right here beside you?" Emma looked at Rex as if seeking his approval, then nodded slowly. "If Rex stays with me, I can be brave," she said, her voice clearer and stronger than it had been in months. He makes the scared feelings go away. Dr. Park immediately began documenting what she was witnessing. The transformation in Emma's demeanor was so dramatic that it would be crucial evidence for convincing Judge Williams to allow Rex in the courtroom. The therapeutic benefit is undeniable, she murmured to Foster. This isn't just emotional comfort, it's neurological healing happening in real time. Judge Williams, who had been monitoring the situation from her chambers, decided to see for herself what was happening. When she entered the conference room, she found Emma sitting calmly beside Rex, speaking in quiet, complete sentences to Dr. Park about her favorite colors, her grandmother's cooking, and other normal childhood topics. Kind of casual conversation that had been impossible for her since the trauma. Your Honor, Foster said quietly, I'd like to request a highly unusual accommodation. I believe Emma can testify effectively with Rex present in the courtroom. Judge Williams studied the scene before her, a traumatized child who had been unable to speak coherently an hour ago, now chatting peacefully while petting a police dog who seemed to understand his therapeutic role. In her 22 years on the bench, she had never seen anything quite like it. Officer Chun, Judge Williams addressed Sarah directly. In your professional opinion, would your partner behave appropriately in a courtroom setting? Sarah looked at Rex, who was maintaining perfect composure despite the unusual circumstances. Yes, Your Honor, Rex is trained for crowd control and public appearances. He'll remain calm and focused regardless of the environment. And Dr. Park, the judge continued, you're prepared to testify that this dog's presence is therapeutically necessary for the child's ability to provide testimony? Absolutely, Your Honor. What I'm witnessing here represents the most significant breakthrough in Emma's recovery since the incident. Without Rex, I believe Emma will be unable to testify coherently. With him present, she appears capable of clear, detailed communication. Judge Williams made a decision that would set legal precedent across the country. Very well, we'll reconvene in 30 minutes. Rex will be present in the courtroom during Emma's testimony. This is unprecedented, but justice sometimes requires us to break new ground. As the adults made preparations for the resumed trial, Emma continued to whisper to Rex, telling him about her dreams, her fears, and her hope that the bad man would never hurt anyone else again. Rex listened with the patience of a saint and the wisdom of a creature who understood that sometimes the most important police work involves simply being present when a child needs to find her voice. The breakthrough had finally come, not through months of therapy or legal maneuvering, but through the simple presence of a dog who had never forgotten the little girl he had helped save, and who was about to help her save herself all over again. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as Emma Martinez walked hand in hand with Officer Sarah Chun toward the witness stand, Rex padding quietly beside them with the dignity of a seasoned professional. The jury of 12 men and women watched in fascination as this unprecedented scene unfolded. A 3-year-old girl, a police officer, and a German shepherd creating legal history with every step they took across the polished courthouse floor. Judge Patricia Williams had made the decision to allow the jury back into the courtroom after Emma's remarkable transformation, but she had prepared them with careful instructions. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are about to witness testimony that involves a therapy animal. The presence of this police dog is not a gimmick or emotional manipulation. It is a medically necessary accommodation for our young witness. You must base your verdict solely on the testimony you hear, not on any emotional response to the animal's presence. Rachel Foster stood at the prosecutor's table, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. 4 months of preparation had led to this moment, and everything depended on whether Emma could maintain her newfound confidence once the formal proceedings began. Behind her, she could hear the soft murmur of reporters and courtroom observers, many of whom had never seen anything like this in their years covering legal proceedings. At the defense table, James Morrison watched with professional resignation and unexpected personal discomfort. His legal strategy had been sound: exploit the weakness of a child witness to create reasonable doubt. But watching Emma's courage, as she approached the witness stand, her small hand resting protectively on Rex's head, Morrison found himself hoping, despite his professional obligations, that justice would somehow prevail. Marcus Thompson sat beside his attorney, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the dignity surrounding Emma's entrance. For the first time since his arrest, he was seeing the child he had terrorized not as a nameless victim, but as a real person, with a name, a family, and a courage that shamed his own cowardice. The months in county jail had given him time to think about what he had done, and the weight of his actions pressed down on him like a physical force. Dr. Lisa Park positioned herself in a chair near the witness stand, close enough to provide support if needed, but far enough away to allow Emma her independence. She watched with professional amazement as her young patient displayed a confidence that would have been impossible just hours earlier. The presence of Rex had accomplished more in 30 minutes than months of traditional therapy had achieved. "Good afternoon, Emma," Foster began, her voice gentle but clear enough for the jury to hear. "Can you tell us your name and how old you are?" Emma looked at Rex, who gazed back at her with calm, reassuring eyes. Drawing strength from her four-legged protector, she spoke clearly into the microphone. "My name is Emma Martinez, and I'm 3 years old. Almost 4, she added with a hint of the pride typical of young children discussing their age. "Emma, do you remember a day when something scary happened to you while you were playing at your grandmother's house?" Emma's small hand found Rex's fur, and she nodded solemnly. "Yes, a bad man grabbed me when I was making sandcastles. He had a knife, and he scared me very much." The courtroom was so quiet that the soft whir of the air conditioning seemed loud. Jurors leaned forward, captivated by the clear, brave voice of this tiny witness who was about to change legal history. "Can you tell us what the bad man looked like, Emma?" Foster continued, carefully following the script she had developed with Dr. Park. Emma turned to look directly at Marcus Thompson for the first time since entering the courtroom. Her gaze was steady, unafraid, as if Rex's presence had given her the courage to face her attacker. He was tall and had brown hair. He smelled bad, like he was sick. And he was very angry and scared. The accuracy of her description sent a chill through the courtroom. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unable to meet the steady gaze of the child he had traumatized. "Emma," Foster asked the crucial question, "do you see that bad man in this room today?" Without hesitation, Emma raised her small arm and pointed directly at Thompson. "That's him. That's the man who grabbed me and put the knife by my neck." Morrison started to object, but found himself unable to speak. The child's identification was clear, unequivocal, and devastating to his case. But it was Emma's next words that would be remembered long after the trial ended and would inspire changes in courtrooms across the nation. She turned to Rex, placed both small hands on either side of his noble head, and spoke with the wisdom of someone far beyond her 3 years. "But you know what?" she said, addressing the jury as much as Rex. "I wasn't alone that scary day. Rex was there, and all the police officers, and they made sure the bad man couldn't hurt me anymore. Rex made me feel safe when I was most scared. He's my hero dog, and he taught me that even when bad things happen, there are always good people and good dogs who will protect us." The emotional impact of her words was immediate and profound. Several jurors wiped tears from their eyes, and even the court reporter paused in her typing, moved by the child's extraordinary courage and wisdom. Judge Williams had to call for a brief recess as she composed herself, amazed by what she was witnessing. During cross-examination, Morrison was gentle and respectful, understanding that any aggressive questioning would only backfire spectacularly. Emma answered his few questions with the same clear confidence, never wavering in her identification of Thompson or her account of the events. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts, including kidnapping, aggravated assault, burglary, and child endangerment. Thompson was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never again threaten a child's safety. But the story's impact extended far beyond the courtroom that day. News of Emma's testimony spread rapidly through social media and national news outlets. The image of a brave 3-year-old girl testifying with her hero dog beside her captured the public's imagination and heart, inspiring legislation in 17 states that would allow therapy animals in courtrooms for child witnesses. Rex received the Phoenix Police Department's Medal of Valor, becoming the first canine officer in the department's history to be honored for therapeutic service rather than traditional police work. The ceremony, held on the courthouse steps 6 months after the trial, drew hundreds of supporters who came to celebrate the dog who had helped a child find her voice. Dr. Park's documentation of Emma's case became required reading in child psychology. Programs across the country demonstrating the power of animal-assisted therapy in trauma recovery. Her work with Emma and Rex led to the establishment of the National Child Witness Support Program, which trains therapy animals specifically for courtroom support. Officer Sarah Chun and Rex began making regular visits to Emma's home, their friendship deepening with each encounter. Rex seemed to understand his special role in Emma's life, always gentle and patient with the little girl who had claimed a permanent place in his heart. These visits became part of Emma's ongoing therapy, helping her process her trauma while building confidence and resilience. Emma herself became an unexpected advocate for other child victims of crime. Despite her young age, she participated in age-appropriate awareness campaigns, always accompanied by Rex, showing other traumatized children that healing was possible, and that they could find their voices too. 2 years after the trial, Emma Martinez stood in the same courthouse where she had made history, this time as a healthy, confident 5-year-old participating in a ceremony honoring child advocates. Rex, now showing some gray around his muzzle, but still dignified and strong, stood proudly beside her as she received a special recognition for her courage. "I want to tell all the kids who are scared like I was," Emma said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong, "that there are always heroes ready to help you. Sometimes they have 4 legs and wet noses, and sometimes they wear uniforms, but they're always there when you need them most. You just have to be brave enough to let them help you find your voice." In the audience, Marcus Thompson's victims' rights advocate read a letter he had written from prison, expressing remorse for his actions and gratitude that Emma had found healing despite what he had done to her. His transformation in prison, inspired partly by Emma's courage, had led him to work with other inmates on victim impact awareness. As Emma and Rex walked out of the courthouse that day, surrounded by family, friends, and supporters, they represented something powerful and lasting. Proof that justice can be both served and healing. That courage comes in all sizes, and that sometimes the most important heroes are the ones who simply stand beside us when we need to find the strength to speak our truth. Their story had become more than just a legal case. It was a testament to the healing power of the human animal bond and a reminder that in our darkest moments, hope can arrive on 4 paws, ready to help us find our way back to the light.